What is up, everybody? It is your local Ottawa fan, and I'm here to talk to you today about the 4-3 shootout loss to Minnesota. I know normally my thoughts that aren't, directly about what happened in the game and just generally about the state of the team or the league I do before the video. But today I actually want to save it for the end. So I'm just going to jump right into what happened. It was a fast-paced first period. Both sides had a bunch of great chances. I think we had a really good chance with Emily Clark. It was a cross-ice pass and a really good shot, really good look. Minnesota just got there in time, ate it up. And Abstrider was our starter. Abstrider was our starter, not Maschmeyer. And she was great. All game she was great. The reason why it went to overtime and why it went shootout was in big part thanks to Abstrider having a monster game. She had like over 30 saves. Like just a great game all around, gives me a lot of confidence moving forward that, Maschmeyer doesn't need to take 100% of the weight of this team. That's a huge relief. It's good to know that we have two very solid goaltenders. Abstrider was borderline perfect in terms of the workload she was given. Like, she had to face a lot of shots. I could see her, getting wins against teams like, Boston, New York, teams where maybe their shot output won't be as insanely high as Minnesota. She could definitely be a brick wall. And there was one chance actually right early on. Minnesota, they get a bunch of chances right in front of our net, and we get a clear right as it gets to an open net. It is very, very smart heads up play. I couldn't catch the name of the defender. I can't remember who it was, but Abstrider made a few big saves, save off the rebound, and then the puck just trickles to the open net, and we get a huge clear before Minnesota can get to it. Big back and forth period to start, but ultimately Minnesota's the one that starts the scoring. It is just a rebound in front of the net, and not much we can do here. The first period is where a lot of the scoring happens. The first period, it was action-packed. The first half, even though there wasn't really like for the first, I think, 9 minutes, there wasn't a lot of scoring, but there was a lot of action. There was a lot of both sides getting chances. And then the second half, it was a lot of scoring. So Minnesota gets on the board first. And then right as it looked like we were finally settling the game down, Minnesota still was coming at us. After they scored, they still had a lot of sustained pressure on us. And right when it looked like we were going to settle things, Denisa Krasova, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that name right, she had a great game, and she gets her first goal of the game, and Minnesota's up 2-0. And normally this is where panic should set in. Minnesota's doing very well in the first period. They've had a lot of pressure. Like I said, at the end of the game, Abstrider faced a lot of shots. You could see how in the early goings of the game, it was starting to look like we might be in for it. We might be in for a long game. And then Minnesota gives us an inch. They take a penalty, and that is all we need. Haley Skamura with a huge play. She stops it from going out of the zone, and then she just rips it, and boom, right back in it, 2-1. This was a game filled with snipes for both sides, and this one, textbook snipe. She just delivers it right in the breadbasket for her too. She just it's one of those plays where it's like boom, 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 where it looks like Minnesota's about to clear, and she just comes in, grabs it, and then immediately gets her shot right where she wants it, and we are right back in it. And before long, Daryl Watts gets a chance, is denied. And then before long after that, Jenner to Watts to Mrazova, tie game. And the rest of the period, we stuck with it. We had a good, strong finish to the period. We ultimately even got a power play, which led into the second period to even more monumental, wonderful play by Ottawa. Mrazova again, and early into the second period, Mrazova knocks it home 3-2 Ottawa. And I want to say, before I go to the rest of the game and what happened, we stuck with it. Down 2-0 in the first, early in the first. We stuck with it. We tied it by the end of the first. We got a power play, and on that power play, we score. We score. Like, immediately we make it 3-2 almost. Like, we are down 2-0, and then on a dime, everything changes, and we get right back into the game. The second half, we played great, and if it wasn't for that first 10 minutes, again, if it wasn't for that first 10 minutes, where Minnesota just plays really well, gets up 2-0, you can't help but wonder. But it also feels like I say this every game. Every game I'm saying, oh man, if this small part of the game went differently, or if this thing went differently, Ottawa would have won. And it especially feels like that against Minnesota. I'll get back into the second period. So, well, it actually, for a second, it looks like we might have made it 4-2, but it's an obvious no goal. We basically pushed the goaltender into the net. I don't think there's any controversy there. I'm not going to be up in arms and say we should have won. It's not a goal. In no world is that a goal. And we get another power play. We got a lot of power plays in the second period and end of the first period where even if we didn't score, we looked deadly. And again, we looked deadly. Minnesota really put the pressure on throughout the second half. They did in the second half of the second period. And Abstrider stonewalled them. Abstrider played exceptionally well. I cannot stress enough. Like she made an argument for starter. I think it's still Maschmeyer's net, but Abstrider made her case known. And it's a damn good case. Abstrider could easily be a starting goaltender. Easily. If for whatever reason Maschmeyer couldn't play for a few games, or if she's just having a few off nights, I trust Abstrider. I'd even go so far as to say if Maschmeyer lets in like 2 of the first 6, put in Abstrider. She played great, and that's what you want to see. And Mrazova then, immediately she has an impact to tie the game up. Then immediately she has an impact to take the lead, and she almost gets a hattie, but just barely misses. But ultimately, we do hold them off for the rest of the second period, and we go into the third. And this is the pivotal period. You know, go into the third with a lead. I've seen so many games where we go into the third with a tie or a lead, and we come out either with a loss in regulation or after regulation. And what do you think I'm going to tell you happens? Minnesota threw everything at us. At the start of the third period, they gave us everything. It was clear that they were not going to go away easily. And, you know, they put a lot of pressure on us, and that ultimately does lead to us getting a penalty. And our penalty kill, it's good. We kill the penalty, but we give Minnesota a lot of chances. We give them a lot to work with. And there's just this sense that something's got to give. Either Minnesota is finally going to give us some space, some room, we can settle things down and then start eating clock, or we're going to break and we're going to let one in. And it was the latter. Another snipe by Krzyzova. Another snipe. And I mean, at that point, it felt like we just had no offense throughout the third period when they scored. Like, it was just all Minnesota throughout the third period. This was a very pivotal period. A period to face adversity and finally finish the job against Minnesota. And again, it just does not go our way. And they tie it up. And Emily Clark had a few good chances this game. She almost gets back the lead in the third. She almost ends it on it. Well, she doesn't, but she gets a pass off that almost ends it in overtime. Emily Clark had a few good chances, and she had a great game, you know. But again, we're always close, but close isn't enough. You know, close only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades. And we take about 12 minutes really to wake up in the third period. It takes us about 12 minutes until we actually get anything going offensively. Once we do, both sides get a few chances. Jinsey Rose, especially, she has basically a huge stop on an open net, and that kind of leads to a play the other way. But we take a penalty with 33 seconds, and while we survive that penalty, we survive in overtime. We get in overtime. We survive that penalty. We actually, after surviving that penalty, we finally get momentum back. We test their goaltender, and there's just not enough time, and we go into shootout, and this is where we fall short. Abstracted did good in the shootout. I think she was 2 for 5, and the 3 that went in were very good. We went 1 for 4. I'm going to be honest, I don't know why Hughes and Mrazova weren't in the lineup. I really don't. I think that they've been really hot as of late, and I think that at least one of them should have been one of the first 4. But I'm not exactly going to knock who we did play. Like, I understand putting in Skamura, Jenner, Watts, Clark. Like, they all make sense. They're all good choices. The only one who I probably for sure, if I was the coach, wouldn't have put in the first 4, and honestly not the first 5, would have been Jenner. While she has, she's been good. She has gotten a decent amount of points, actually. I know some people have said like the captain's been quiet, but she hasn't been. She's I think 8 points on the season. She's one of the top point getters on the team. But right now, just at this point in the season, I feel like I trust Hughes and Mrazova on a shootout chance. But like I said, I wanted to save my general thoughts for the end of the game. And my general thoughts are this. I have made 4 videos about Ottawa against Minnesota. I have made 4 videos about us almost beating Minnesota, but them ultimately winning by 1 goal. I have made 5 videos about Ottawa getting out of regulation. I have made 5 videos of Ottawa losing outside of regulation. And it is killing us. We are very lucky that Minnesota and Boston lost their games. And that's why I waited a little bit. I wanted to see just how bad this was. And we are lucky. But every time we have an opportunity to get back in the hunt and maybe give us some separation. If Minnesota loses to us, even if they lose to us in overtime or shootout, and then Boston and New York lose their games, that changes the landscape of what we need in the final 9 games of the season. We're in the final 9 games of the season. Like, the season is coming to an end very soon. And you can't help but think that these games might haunt us. So many times we come this close, and so many times we don't win. And this time we survived the overtime. And we lost in the shootout. And, I mean, especially in a shootout, that's basically a skills competition. Like, what strategy more could we have done? I don't know. I don't know. I feel like our third period out the gate, our effort just was... It's not even that our effort wasn't there. It's that we weren't ready to match the intensity that Minnesota brought. Minnesota fought for their lives. They really did. And it paid off. And after they scored, we were able to retaliate and kind of settle the game down for the rest of the third. But part of me is very, very worried that if this keeps up, I'm going to be making a video, game 20, 21, 22, about Ottawa's elimination, and we miss the playoffs by 3 to 6 points. And we look back and say, if we just beat Minnesota a few times, if we just did that a few times, if we just got 3 or 4 more goals, maybe we make the postseason. And I don't want that to be the situation. This could have been a regulation win. It could have been. And I'm just hoping that the PWHL scriptwriters are just cooking. Maybe this is all a ploy to get us to barely limp into the playoffs at 4th. Minnesota wins first, and they say that they want to challenge us, and then boom, all 3 games, overtime winners. We never win in overtime until the playoffs. If that's the plan, then I'm okay. Then I'm happy. But right now, it feels like, again, this team is good, and that's the thing that kind of sucks. If we were just getting badly beaten, if Minnesota was just mollywopping us, absolutely dummying us, it's like 8-0. They're beating us by at least 3 goals. I wouldn't care as much. I'd say they're the better team. And this reminds me of, if you remember, for Sens fans, the bubble season, the all-Canadian division. Edmonton just always beat us. They always beat us. But let's be honest, Edmonton was clearly the better team, and most of those games you could have turned off by the second period. You knew the result by then. If we lost all of those games by 1, I think that, we would have lost our minds. And that ultimately did cost Ottawa the playoffs. If they won just a few of those games against Edmonton, they might have been able to slip into the playoffs, to barely edge out Montreal and make it. But Edmonton was clearly so much better that season. They clearly were playing at a slightly higher level. And I can't really say the same about Minnesota. I can't really sit here and honestly tell you that Minnesota is just the clearly superior team, and that is why they beat us 4 straight times. Because every time they beat us, they do it by the skin of their teeth. They barely get out with their lives, but they always barely get out with their lives. Every single time, without fail, whether we're in Minnesota or in Ottawa, Minnesota beats us by 1. They find a way, and we don't find a way. Every time we go into overtime, we don't find a way. And I've said it before, and I'll say it again. We need to just find a way to be clutch. And that's a hard thing to teach, especially when it's a deeply talented team. And we have gotten clutch goals. And that's, I think, why I was upset to not see Morozova and to not see Hughes, because they are players who I really feel can come up clutch. Look at Morozova this game. We were down 2-0. She gets the tying goal and the goal that gives us the lead. That is the definition of clutch, of getting big goals in big moments. Why don't you put her in the shootout? You might say that she's not the most skilled player for a breakaway, but at the same time, then if she misses, it's like, all right, well, she was hot. She's been doing well. She's been getting lots of goals lately. She's now the point leader on the team. She now has more points than anyone else on the team. She's the first player in PWHL Ottawa history to hit double-digit points. The first player to hit double-digit points, and she did not get a shot in shootout. I would have called her number. And I think that's the thing. We need players who are clutch, and I couldn't help but think of one of the players on Minnesota who scored in the shootout. Zumwinkle is clutch. She's really clutch. If she's on the ice in overtime, I'm scared. I'm shaking in my boots. And it feels like we don't have enough of that. It's not to say that we don't have it at all, but we just need a little bit more, especially in such a tight race for that final playoff spot. New York is 1 point away from tying us. We are 1 point away from tying Boston. It is a tight race between 3 teams for that last playoff spot. And it's looking more and more like it is a 3-team race. That as time goes on, Minnesota, Montreal, and Toronto just get more and more separation. So it's going to come down to Ottawa, Boston, New York. One of those teams is going to make it. The other 2 are going to fall. It has to be us. And it's going to be us if we can just get that extra micrometer. Just that extra this. But I think it's something you can see. This game, it almost sapped my enthusiasm. Because when we survived that overtime, I'm going to be honest, I thought, this is it. Minnesota's finally done. And again, we lost. I'm going to be honest, I think Minnesota is now the team that I dislike the most in the PWHL. They're the team that, like, I cannot stand that they have always beaten us. Because even Montreal, that's our next game. It's Montreal. So it's going to be a huge test for us. But Montreal, at least in one of the games, they very convincingly beat us. They beat us convincingly. They had a great third. They got a hat trick against us. We were not as good as them that game. I still think that, you know, we can beat them. But at least they, like, convincingly beat us. And I could write one of the games off and say, look, Montreal came to play and we didn't one day. One of those games where we lost, it was Montreal's night. And Minnesota, every time we play them, it feels like we could have, sometimes should have won, and every single time we don't. It makes me want to pull my hair out. The same thing with overtime, because I know this team is capable. I know this team is capable of getting those overtime wins. I know this team is capable of getting those wins against Minnesota. And I hope we get them sooner rather than later. I hope we get them and we get enough to make the postseason. But this, I think, has been the loss that was just the most draining for me. Like, what is it going to take to beat Minnesota? I'm praying that this is all just part of the PWHL scriptwriter's grand plan of, oh, haha, we got you. PWHL Ottawa can't win in overtime, 3-on-3, but don't worry, when we get the 5-on-5 overtime, they're going to beat Minnesota 3 times. If that's the case, then I'll be happy, but it feels like our lives could have been so much easier. We've had so many opportunities to make our lives so much easier, and yet we're still sitting outside a playoff spot. We still have to watch a game between Boston and New York. One of those teams is going to get at least 2 points. Maybe 3. And then we still have to beat Montreal. We've got a long road ahead of us, and we don't have a lot of games left. But you can see the potential. This team can do it. And until we're out of it mathematically, I'm still going to hold out hope. And as always, go Ottawa, go.